Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where we discuss the challenges of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that even means. I'm Kane, and joining me today with Maddie on annual leave again is Ryan. Ryan, how you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Yourself?
Oh, not too bad. We're a man down again. Matthew, just taking so much annual leave. I don't know how many annual leave days we get here at Daddy Eats Last, but I think he's taking unpaid leave today.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know whether we got annual leave, but he certainly racked up the most compared to you and I.
Well, you're off to Germany in a couple of weeks' time, so you might be putting an application for annual leave.
I may be going over to Deutschland and spending 3 weeks there.
Very nice. Just looking after the bunnies.
It's a good question. So we're very lucky with where we live. We have a concierge downstairs, and we found out that one of the people who works down there pretty regularly has 3 rabbits of her own and loves rabbits. So she will be coming up and looking after our bunnies for most of the time, which is very handy for us.
That's awesome. We couldn't work out much better than that.
No. We last time we went away for about 10 days, we paid for somebody to come in sort of every second day, and she basically found out that we did that and then kind of had a go at us, saying that we should have just asked her. So
it's
pretty handy.
I don't know if people walk around with a different badge saying they love rabbits or they have rabbits or something like that. So who would know unless he brought it up? So it's a good result.
Exactly. So no, we're very lucky there.
Speaking of results and things which are result related, today we want to discuss, I guess, competitiveness and whether you're competitive, whether I'm competitive, whether we're competitive, whether you have been in the past or I guess where you're at. So you've just been for a run.
Yes.
8K run, was it 5K run?
I went for 8, so it was quite nice.
Now, do you compare, do you compete with yourself? I'd imagine you run by yourself, so you don't compete with anyone else while you're on a run as such. But are you competitive with tracking how long it takes you to go for a run? Do you do that?
Not with that. So when I go for running's kind of a bit of me time, if anything. So it depends. I sort of just feel the body. Like today's run was pretty good, but other times I'll just go for a very slow, long run. But I play a number of sports throughout the week and do obstacle racing, which I get ridiculously competitive in. So running sort of like, I probably would compete against myself if I didn't have all the other bits and pieces.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you obviously play hockey as well, so there's competitive stuff there, and mostly competitive. It was 13-1 last week, so that wasn't very competitive, but you're obviously competitive in that environment.
Yeah, very competitive on the sporting field, even indoor cricket. It's a social comp, but we can all get quite competitive. So if I didn't have those sort of outlets, I think I'd probably track my running a bit more. But one of the reasons that I like running by myself is because it's just, people say it's weird, but it's actually like very relaxing for me going for a very long run. If I do run with other people though, they better be stuffed by the end of it with me. I kind of make sure that that's the case. Or if they want to, if they're like, no, I'm feeling pretty good, and even if I'm knackered, I'll be like, that's all right, we'll keep going for another 2Ks.
Well, so this is the thing. Before Matthew went on annual leave or unpaid leave or whatever the hell he's doing now, he's actually on his parents' farm with no reception, so we couldn't pick in anyway. He did suggest that we actually do an episode while we're having a run, which would be great on the basis of just going for a leisurely run. But on what you just said there, I'm not sure I'll go ahead with that because we're at a distance where I'm more of a sprinter and you're a bit more of a long distance guy, so we might need to meet somewhere around the sort of 3 to 4K mark. So something like the tan might work well.
Yeah, no, the 10 would work well, and if we do that, which I do think we should do, it would be we're doing a podcast whilst in motion rather than a run to change the mentality of the competitiveness there, Kane. So there's ways to get around it.
You may be the only one who would be able to talk while running. But we will do that one. We'll run the 10 head to head, and we'll see how far behind you I finish, and if I can actually maintain a conversation while we do it. But what about the work environment? Are you competitive in a work or a business environment? You have a lot of different hats that you wear. Are you competitive in that environment? And what does competition mean for you, I guess, in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's one that I've been playing with for probably the last decade, because I, as a kid, stupidly competitive. I still now. If you ask any of my close friends, I sort of flagged this topic with TK, and she just laughed as soon as I said, "Oh, we're going to talk about being competitive," and she just laughed and was just like, "Yep, you're a gold medalist in that." So yeah, look, in a business environment, I'm very competitive. I played a lot of sport as a kid and was really competitive there. And then I found a love for businesses and building businesses, because I think that business in itself can be a vehicle to do good and impact a lot of people. Not just a vehicle for money, but by virtue of scale and building businesses, you can extend reach. And in health, that's a very good way to help a lot of people. So I actually see business, as far as I'm concerned, business and sport are the same thing for me. So building the teams that we have, I always look at best practice on how to manage a sporting team, to no different to how do we manage a business team. One of the businesses that I'm looking after with at the moment, we're growing at about 15-20% each month, which is very, very quick. So bringing on new team members and building that. And it really is conversations with them around competition of, give an indication, we're 30% ahead of our budget line for this year over the last 4 months. So am I competitive? Absolutely, because 30% I'm kind of like, yeah, we're on par as to where we should be. And everyone else is like overachieving. And I'm like, no, not good enough. So yeah, I suppose in every facet I would be competitive, and I do see work and business as, I guess, my sport now that I can at least play for the next 40 years if my body breaks down.
Yeah, now, do you pick battles, like, be it in sport or be it, I guess, in the business environment? And what I mean is, I'm an accountant by profession, and when I started out as a graduate, you were measured each sort of 6 months against other accountants who you came in at. So I came in as a graduate. After 6 months, you'd have a review. You'd have another review 6 months after that, so biannual. And you'd really essentially be competing against people at your own level for sort of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, to see who could progress fastest. And then after I started my own business, again in the accounting environment, you're potentially competing against a whole host of other different businesses who are doing the same thing as me. And I kind of learned at that point where it was very difficult being a startup accounting firm to compete with like the super top end of town. So I almost switched from being very competitive or quite competitive against people at my own level, because you could be benchmarked against people while you were employed running your own business, and understanding that I'm not really competing with X, Y, and Z accounting firm. I'm really competing with, I guess, myself and what my goals are. So my competitiveness in that work environment really changed when I went from an employee to a business starter to business owner.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make there. I think one of the things that I've done, and I'm actually working on it with an executive coach at the moment, is to harness my competitiveness either against myself. And what I mean by that is, one of the really good things that I've read in the last 6 months is compare yourself to who you were yesterday rather than who somebody else is today. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do a lot of, because I used to do like much no different to that, when you were a graduate accountant, where you were competing against the people right next to you. And I think that can create a really toxic environment. Correct. So I used to be really competitive against those around me, or, had to be better than this person in sport, or had to be the best in everything. Whereas now I think it is much more pick your battles. So like last weekend when we were 3 players down, didn't get overly competitive that we got smacked 13-1 in hockey. Got competitive around, making sure that I was doing, like, I didn't slack off during the game, and fitness and all those kind of things. But yeah, so I think picking your battles is something that I've sort of worked on and evolving, and especially as well with what you're saying, like running a startup versus say being in a big corporation, and constantly comparing yourself to others. I do see, because I get to play in both of those worlds, it worries me a little bit and does make me a little bit sad, the competitiveness that can occur with people just stabbing people in that when they're competing against each other and when they're benchmarked against that. And I suppose it's an easy way to benchmark it because you're right in front of somebody. So you can kind of benchmark against that. But yeah, really thinking about comparing and competing with yourself of yesterday, not who somebody else is today. Because if I try and compete with other people who are general managers or CEOs or running businesses who are 20 years older than me, which I used to do a couple of years ago, it's generally, I've found, it's a bit of a recipe for disaster because it's just not possible. So by competing and growing against, metrics that we can control, I think that gives a lot more of a healthy competition.
100% agree. And that's a really good piece of advice you've touched on there. I guess by your executive coach, what you've been reading. That it's really important, primarily, to compete against yourself, because comparing yourself and competing against other people is just fraught with danger. Because you can look at people on social media, on your Instagram, on your Twitter, and what they're posting, and I guess what their wins, inverted commas, are often not really sort of real life as well. So you have to take what other people say they're achieving with a grain of salt too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what really clicked for me, and I'm constantly working on it because unfortunately I'm a highly competitive person, and that was, I guess, growing up and in everything, you were sort of like through school and that you were competing against, you needed to get an A and make sure that everyone else was getting a B, or if they got an A, you wanted an A plus, or whatever the environment was. And I think that when we do that, it can create a really tough environment, because one of the things, especially now, and what you touched on, that with social media and all those other things, there's no way. We think that we know more about people's lives than ever because we can see things on social media and that kind of thing, but there's no way of getting a full picture. There's absolutely no way of knowing what that full picture looks like. So yeah, I suppose I'm going through a bit of a thing at the moment on how can we compete against, still foster that competition, but how do we compete against creating something great good, or competing against, what we want to achieve in the business this year or as a team this year, and not necessarily for that to beat another team, but for us instead to achieve something really good. Like if we can continue to grow that 15-20% by the end of the year, it's a new site. We've doubled the size of the team. We've got a new division. We get to build a new site. So that's what we're competing against now. In something like that, a project that you and I are working on, if we can grow our online startup to be of a certain size, then we can do different things that we haven't been able to do before. But I think one of the good things is that slowly but surely, I think the world of business is moving towards that, which I like, which is why I think for those who are competitive, it's a really good arena to flex that competitive muscle. Because a couple of years ago, I was really questioning whether being competitive is a good trait and whether it actually makes you a bad person, because it can in the wrong way make you feel like that, and I had felt like that at times. Now I actually think, and I kind of stopped competing, which was actually really sad for me. It led to a few mental health problems because I inherently just beat off competition. Whether I win or lose, it's not about that. It's just about playing. And then when I realized that competitiveness in itself as a trait is actually really good and really powerful, it's just how you apply it that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I think the politicians of the world out there, like we're coming into an election here in Australia. I think we learn a lot from that, in that it is at the moment, it's just all about we're going to beat you and we're going to beat you, and nobody's actually really seemingly looking at what's best for Australia. There's so many different political parties, but all just bashing each other. No one's actually kind of going, we'll work together and push the country in the right direction. So having your competitive hat on in the right environment, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I mean it's a perfect example. Talking about the political landscape at the moment, which, whilst albeit a bit controversial, I think most people, especially in Australia, are just fed up with it. Because it's basically, who am I going to vote for, shit or shitter? Because I don't know what any of them do apart from bag the other one at the moment. But, where we could use competition as a good thing would be like, okay, how can we compete as Australia to be the best in the world for renewable energy, for example, or something like that? So how can we compete as to be the most innovative place for renewable energy? That makes sense, competing on a large scale. But at the moment, yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's competing on a micro level that is just bringing out bad traits in human nature, which is like, targeting other people very maliciously. And again, going back to that environment of when you were, say, a graduate accountant, I can't imagine that it was overly healthy or happy, or that when you were every 6 months compared to Johnny next to you or Sally across from you, and basically like thrown into a ring and go, fight, fight.
Yeah, I think my balance at that time was I was playing sport at a fairly high level, so I got my competitive sort of fix outside of the work environment. I didn't care about the competition inside work. It wasn't as much a priority for me because I was competing in, I guess, a sport environment. I was also doing some hobbies which were, I guess, somewhat competitive, or at least result-based. I could gauge my results in that environment. So again, picking those battles and picking where you want to compete was really important for me at that particular time. So, and I used to have white line fever when I used to play sport. And I know people who kind of meet me now kind of go, I can't imagine that. I seem relatively calm. I used to be kind of a little bit nuts on the sporting arena.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that one. I've calmed down a lot more. I think age does help, which is good. I think also realizing what you can and cannot control is very helpful. Because I know friends of mine who get white line fever and go absolutely nuts while they're watching a sporting game. And I used to be like that, like with their footy team or something like that. And then you kind of realize that no matter what I do on the sidelines, I can't get on the field and influence any of this. So good idea to let that one go.
I've never understood the whole supporting a team and people going crazy watching the team, like abusing umpires when you're watching, and people wishing you luck when you're playing in the AFL Grand Final. Going, I have nothing to do with this, but people, I guess, live vicariously through their sporting teams, and they compete, I guess, vicariously by picking their team and supporting them. So I'd imagine that's what it is. It's not something which is ever kind of. I've never competed on that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, no control, just watch it and get a bit annoyed every now and again, but it's not something which I carry for days on end. Like certain supporters of certain football teams still talking about the decision in the grand final last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, I go for North Melbourne, so at the moment in the AFL. So at the moment, there's not really much point in competing because we're having a very bad year. But no, I think you're right. I think the reason that people can go a bit nuts is because they like live vicariously through that medium, and that's where I think, unfortunately, sometimes we're made to feel bad if we're competitive people. Like it's not a good thing. It brings out bad traits in people and all this kind of thing. And I inherently don't think being competitive is a bad trait in any way. I think it's actually if it's fostered really well, it can create amazing things. Sport is one of those things where sport is a leveling playing field. It brings people together. You see outrageous and amazing things that occur in sport that I think is really great. And without the competition of sport and that environment and that uplifting, those freakish athletic feats would never happen. So I think being competitive, and it's taken me a long time to get okay with actually being a highly competitive person, is not a bad thing if anyone's feeling bad out there with their competitiveness, because I know that it can push some people away. It's having a look at the environment that you're applying your competitiveness in and how you're doing that I think is where, if you change that to applying it in an environment where you're competitive for an outcome, like what you've said, for a result, for an outcome, for bettering yourself on who you were yesterday, to achieve something rather than beating down somebody, I think that's when being competitive is a great part of, I guess, just being human and what we can do to move humans forward, I suppose.
Now, one last one, Ryan, before we wrap up for today. Do you ever compete with TK?
Oh, that is a good question. That is a very good
I asked this because I have competed with a partner before, but not my current partner. Competed in a particular environment and a particular aspect of things that it wasn't healthy for the relationship. So, again, that's because it was one of the areas where I was competing when it wasn't a workplace competition. So, again, having a competition in particular be extremely healthy for a relationship, and there's other parts where it may not be. So, over to you, mate.
No, it's a good question. And I think with TK, I'm fortunate that we operate in different work environments. So there isn't, and because we're two inherently different people, which is really good, and we're aware of, like I, by 40, want to CEO or run a multinational, etc., with thousands of people. She has absolutely no interest in doing that as well, but a very, very high achiever in her own right, of an expertise high achiever versus that. So thankfully, we don't have to compete in that front. We do compete in terms of if we go and play like some mini golf or something like that. Absolutely. I can get very competitive there, which is dangerous. But I would say that, no, apart from those little fun competitions, yeah, there's nothing major that we do compete in, which I agree. I'm thinking of friends and people that have been close to me before that I have competed with in bigger things, and I can't think of any of them where it was beneficial to the relationship.
Yeah, I think mini golf is one of those common areas where partners may compete. And I do want to point out, my better half, if you are listening, I do remember last time we played mini golf, you were 6 shots up at 9 holes, and I end up beating you by 2 shots. I just point that out while we're just recording this.
So yeah, I lost my last mini golf, and it still stings. Stings. But
it's one of those areas which partners do kind of take some. It's fun, but there is a modest amount of competition involved as well.
It's a fine line, I think. It's a dangerous line that you can walk in that space.
Yeah, you are right. And you come up with some really good points today about having competitiveness, I guess, with yourself, and also having competitiveness in the right environment. And balance, as with all these things, is what's really important. That does wrap it up for this week. We subscribe to E36 on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review. Also, tell your mates about the podcast. And in fact, compete. You should call more mates at the podcast than your mate will. Most of all, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week for another episode, or should I say, serving a Paddy Eats last. That's a dad joke. Catch you next week, where Ron will probably beat me running.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.